Welcome, this is Jim, host of the Faith Influencer podcast, where we're going to dive into discussions on faith's role in everyday life, from navigating blended families to overcoming challenges. I'm a husband, a father, a Bible teacher, an advocate for applying faith to everyday life. So tune in as I share personal stories, valuable insights, and practical wisdom. Welcome back to Faith Influencer. This is Jim Cunningham. I'm excited to jump into another podcast with you, and we are tackling the minefield of blended families. So every year, couples come together who were previously married, went through a divorce, have his kids, her kids, and they find a new love, a new relationship. And so they're going to remarry, join together, bring two sets of kids together, and they have refreshed dreams, and everything is going to be exciting. However, what you discover, and I don't have to tell you this if you're long in, what you discover is that there are explosives everywhere. It is a minefield. Now, I'm 15 years into this, so I have walked through this minefield. You've heard me already in previous podcasts introduce Lanny, who helped me know the rules. And so I want to help you. I want to walk this journey with you. And let's turn the statistics around, because to be honest, the statistic is that 70% of the people who enter into a blended family don't make it. But I know why they don't make it. It's because they don't have the playbook. You don't have the rule book. Well, I have the rule book, and I'm going to be uncovering step by step as we go through this journey together. Now, today, we're going to step over the number one explosive in blended families. As a matter of fact, if you want to know what is the biggest reason why blended families don't make it, it's all centered around, you guessed it, children. It's all about the children. Now, when I grew up, there was this show called The Brady Bunch. Now, some of you don't know what this is. I know that. I've mentioned it already. But here was The Brady Bunch. You had a lovely lady who had 3 girls of her own. That was the little song at the beginning. You had the husband who had 3 sons. And you had Alice, who was the housekeeper. And they all came together and created this wonderful blended family called the Brady Bunch. So oftentimes, people who are at least my age know what I mean when I say the Brady Bunch family. So we're going to travel through that, and we're going to uncover what it's really like when you bring his and her families together. So there are 2 people who are listening, 2 groups right now. There are some of you who are thinking about remarriage. Maybe you've already committed to someone. Maybe you're dating someone. Maybe you're engaged to someone. How good is this timing for you? This is perfect timing, because I'm going to uncover the things that you need to know. Now, that's why I'm going to say that my remarriage almost 15 years ago has been successful, and we've blown the statistics out of the water because I went through the playbook before I remarried. So if that's where you are, then you're at a perfect place. But then there are some of you who've already remarried. You have his kids, her kids, you've put it all together, and I promise you, I don't have to explain this to you. You already know that it didn't take long for explosives to show up. And I'm also going to say that depending on the age of your children, it was real quick that your children let you know that they weren't totally happy with this new arrangement. So how does all of this work out? So what do we do? Well, let's walk this together, and let me start here. One of the things in counseling that I work with couples on are, what do you call each other? I just wanted to address that real quick, because inevitably someone says, well, what do I have my stepson call me or my stepdaughter call me? Well, you notice I said stepson and stepdaughter. That's really not the terms we use now. People call them bonus children. I never call my children my stepson or my stepdaughter. Maybe in this podcast, just for understanding, I'll use that term. But I have bonus children. But I have no issue with them calling me their stepdad. There are times that my bonus son will introduce me as his stepdad. That's not a problem. Don't have a problem with that at all. When they're addressing me personally, they call me by my first name. Unless they're really, really young and maybe their biological mother or father is no longer in the picture at all, they probably won't call you mom or dad. So it's okay that they call you by your first name. That's just the way we navigate this field. It's not disrespectful. I wanted you to know that's absolutely fine. So we have that covered. Now, if you've brought these families together, you're probably already at a point of frustration. What's surprising to me still is how quickly it shows up. So I want to uncover a couple of things that are probably going to surprise you when I give you an answer. How do you deal with discipline with each other's children? If we don't answer that and deal with that, you're going to struggle, and it's going to become the source of irritation for all of you. It will even become the source of divorce for you. So we're going to deal with discipline. How do we deal with respect issues? What do you do when you're not feeling the respect from the other person's children? Well, we're going to deal with that as well. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to throw out everything that you thought that a traditional family is supposed to look like. And I want you to realize that this is different. This is a different set of rules, and let's begin uncovering them. So the first issue that we're going to deal with is that when you bring your family together, I want you to do this. Here's number one. You ready? This is the first thing that I experienced. Give your children grace to adjust. Give them grace to adjust. I'm going to say that the area I personally felt most guilty, and even now if I go back, always related to my children. That is the area that I still sometimes can feel most guilty. After all of these years, I still can go there. You can too. But the problem is that if you're overwhelmed by guilt because of what your children went through, you're going to overcompensate in the area of parenting, and it's going to become an issue. So we have to give our children grace. We have to realize that this is a big adjustment for them. And let me say, in my case, when I remarried, I was not, now listen, I was not my wife's children. I was not their dad. Their dad's still in the picture. I was not their dad. I am not their dad. You are not their biological father. You're not their mom. You're not their dad. And have you already experienced that they have no problem letting you know you're not their dad or you're not their mom? They will make sure you know that's not your role. Well, that's okay. Give them grace as they are adjusting. Be patient with them as they are making this transition as well. That's the first thing. Be willing to give them grace. Now, here's the second thing. This is all introduction to this whole area dealing with children. Be willing to prove yourself. I was talking with a couple not long ago. This was a traditional man. Let's call him that. He was the traditional man who's like, this is my house. And so he brought his family together, already struggling, which wasn't a surprise to me after I talked with him. And this is what he said. My children aren't going to tell me what to do, and her children aren't going to tell me what to do. You know what he was doing? He was trying to flex. He's flexing his muscles that I'm in charge of this house. Well, that's going to lead to disaster. You won't be in that relationship long if that's your attitude. I want you to be willing to prove yourself. I want a little humility there on the part of everybody involved. So be willing to prove yourself. Don't flex and be the one. I've got to be in charge, and you better obey what I have to say. That's disaster. But I see it all too often. That's one side. Here's the other side. Sometimes I really think this was my role. I felt like I was the rescuer. I felt like that when I remarried, and it's okay that my new wife looked at me as a rescuer for the whole family. It was this idea that we want a family that loves the Lord, that's centered around family and family time. And I was going to usher all of that in and help create that perfect environment. That's okay if that's your role. Sometimes you're the rescuer. The problem is that I too was bringing in some stuff that I needed to deal with. And so you don't always fulfill that role, but sometimes that's who you are. Let me throw this one aspect in real quick. I'm okay with being the rescuer because this is what I want to be said of me. As I am helping raise, and now when I remarried, her children were young, like 4 and 8. And so almost 15 years later, we've been together for a long time. I can hardly think of anything that pleases me more than the idea that my bonus children look back and say, my stepdad, Jim, was such a blessing to me. I was talking to a lady the other day, and she's grown, and her kids are grown, that is, and she was raised with a stepfather. And we were having this discussion, and this is what she said. She said, my stepdad stepped right in because my biological dad passed away. And my stepdad, when they remarried, my mother remarried, he started coaching our softball team. He started taking me to practices. He was someone who would sit down and I could have a conversation with, and he wasn't judging me. He was just loving. And she looks back now and said that her stepdad was one of the biggest influences in her life for good. That's where I want us to get to. That's what I want to be personally. That's what I want to happen for you and your relationship. So be willing to give them grace. Be willing not to prove yourself, but at the same time, how do we structure this blended family? Well, here is the mistake that happens because of guilt that we feel with our children. I get this. The tendency is to move your child to the center of the family. Or let me say it a different way. Your tendency is to take your child and move them to first place in the family. You know what that is? That is a recipe for disaster. First of all, they were never meant to be in first place. So kids are a welcome addition to the family, but the world doesn't center around them. So kids, here's what they're going to do, and you're probably already experiencing this. When you come in and you're giving them a great grace and you're willing to prove yourself, that doesn't mean they're not going to push the boundaries, because they are. As a matter of fact, they have one interest in mind, and it's usually theirs, not yours. So they're going to come and they're going to push against the boundaries. They're going to test the boundaries. What happens is that the biological parent has this little bit of guilt, and so they allow the child to have their way in the marriage. But you can't do that. You have to show a united front. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say you say to your bonus son, you say, hey, bub, would you mind taking the trash out later this afternoon? And he mumbles, okay. And then a little bit later in the day, you hear him walk up to his mother and say, hey, Mom, is it okay if I take out the trash tomorrow? I'm tired. And she says, sure. Well, my first response is, little turd. But that's what kids are. They're going to push the boundaries like that. So what do? If you heard that happen, you don't go and address him in front of his mother, or you pull mom aside. This is what you do. This is how you navigate this minefield, okay? You pull mom aside and you said, hey, I asked him to take the trash out this afternoon. And then guess whose responsibility it is to go to the son and say, hey, your stepdad already asked you to take the trash out. I need you to go ahead and do that. And if he asks you to do something like that, don't come and ask me to do it a different day, because he and I stand together. Now, you can address that where it's not confrontational. You can do it in a loving way, do it in a private way. Big point. Are you ready? Here's the big point. I learned this the hard way, but it is this. If you don't hear anything else, hear this. When it comes to the discipline of the children in the household, his, hers, and in our case, ours, the biological parent has to be the disciplinarian of their child. You can't do it. If you're the stepdad, you cannot be the disciplinarian of her children. I've heard every reason why you should be that. I've heard I'm the man of the house. I've heard all of these things. But let me just tell you, even if you're in the right, it stings a little bit to hear someone else discipline your children. So as much as your spouse loves you, if you're the disciplinarian of their child, every time you get onto them, it's going to be an issue that you don't want to navigate. So here's what you do. You come to an agreement and you show a united front. You sit down together and you decide, all right, our children, we love them. I'll discipline mine. You discipline yours. When we need to discuss stuff, we'll do it together in private and not in front of the children. Okay? There's your rule there. And if you don't do that, you're going to create something called a monster. That's what you're going to create. You're going to create children that the world revolves around them, so they think. Here's the part that you may not know. When your children are pushing against the boundaries, do you know what they're asking for? Security. It's about security. When your boundaries are in place, they feel secure. Years ago, a study was done on a school playground. The school playground was fenced in, and they videoed all the children playing. And they were all over the playground. They were up against the fence. They were on this side, every side. All the kids were out playing, having fun, laughing, secure. Then they came in and they took all of the fences down. And guess what happened? All of the kids moved away from the outer boundaries to the center of the playground. They lost their boundaries and they lost their security, and they all moved to the center. Then they came and put all the fences back up, and guess what happened? All the kids spread out and ran and laughed and played, which tells you what? It tells you that security comes from boundaries. Boundaries must be in place. So, husband and wife, you must show a united front. A couple of action steps real quick. 1, family dinner. I love this. I almost chuckle when I think of this. I'm thinking of what's going to happen when you sit down with your kids and you say, all right, we're going to have a family dinner. We're going to lay out the expectations and the roles and what we expect of each other. I cackle at that because I know you're going to get some eye rolls. They're going to be thinking, oh, great. Well, just laugh and have fun with it. So when you come together and you're going to have this family dinner because you're outlining the structure of this new arrangement with your family, this is what you're going to do. You're going to just talk about what's expected of this child, this child, this child, and the adults. What's expected of all of you. Make it fun, laugh about it, but lay out what you expect of each one of them. What if you have little children, young children? Same thing. They can pick their toys up when they're finished playing. But whatever it is, you're laying out the roles and the expectations. That's one. Two, you're going to describe to them the relationship that you have with their mother or their father. And you're going to present this united front that you love them more than anything, but you love each other as a couple. And here's the last thing. Security comes from boundaries. Security also comes from a loving husband and wife relationship that models what that looks like for all of the children. There is hardly anything that provides more security in my family than for my wife and I to hold hands, to laugh together, to sit down and read our Bibles together, to go on date nights. There's hardly anything that provides more security. And her children and my children in the background are looking at that and acting like yuck. But inside, they feel this security because their mom and stepdad, in my case, love each other. So these are the initial steps when dealing with children. And we're going to take the next step on the next podcast. So I can't wait to get into it because it's even more explosive. Thank you for joining Faith Influencer, and I look forward to seeing you next time.